You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome to KCSN Update, presented by DraftKings. And this is a very special, rare occasion. We get to do in person with Brett Kollmann today. Brett, what's up, buddy?
Chiefs kingdom enemy number one, apparently.
I'm not up to date on all that, but is it just because you had the audacity to say that the Bengals might beat the Chiefs?
So it's funny. I retracted that pick, by the way. As soon as it came out that Mahomes had no injury designation, but the show already went out. So thanks, Tucker.
Yeah, I'm good for blaming Tucker on absolutely anything we possibly can. But there's plenty to talk about this game because, look, that was a great football game. That was just a great football game. It was a really tough, gritty, all-out kind of performance that you saw from two football teams. And I mean, I get why the Bengals are a tough football team, and they proved that. I mean, it was the
two best teams in the conference. They deserve to be there for one.
And it's the same game they've played 4 times in a row.
Yeah. I mean, and I even said, if the Chiefs win this game, because I felt like the Bengals were their toughest remaining opponent, right? Even though the Eagles have a more talented roster, the Bengals just with Joe Burrow and with Jamar Chase and I mean, God, 4th and 6, they throw it up to Jamar in double coverage. No other team can do that, right? So I felt like if they beat Cincy, especially considering all the injuries they had, 3 receivers are out, you're playing with almost an entirely rookie secondary, they were going to win the Super Bowl. That was how I felt. This was their last major obstacle, and I still hold to that. And I don't really care that the Eagles are favored. I'm picking KC. You would have to give me a unbelievable reason to pick against KC at this point. Yeah, and I've rarely picked against them this season, by the way. The only 2 times I think I picked against them was ironically against Cincy. I'm not doing it again.
You're such a hater. That's my takeaway. Is you're just, God, such a hater. It is, I think one of the things you're talking, the mental hurdle for this team too, because that team went and the Chiefs lost to the Bengals in 3 really close games in really ugly ways 3 straight times. The mental hurdle for the Chiefs getting over that one was kind of big too.
Yeah, and I think this is not a team that lacked confidence, obviously, but it's more so every single time they got close to getting over that hurdle before, something would go wrong.
Yeah.
And most of the time, that something was Jamar. But they survived, right? Yeah. They survived. Even through all the injuries, they survived. And I think, if anything, that's going to slingshot them to be an even better version of themselves. And this is already the best version of the Mahomes offense we've ever seen. Even without Tyreek, even with, some of the, I don't want to say rocky starts. We thought Sky Moore was going to be a bigger factor than he has this year, right? They've still been the best offense, in my opinion, ever.
I mean, that's you're not far off. They're one of the best ever for sure. Okay, so one of the things I keep thinking about with this game is just so wild. And you mentioned the 3 receivers. What do you think a call sheet looks like when you've got three receivers? One of them's a special teams ace. And honestly, Brett, the only reason that Marcus Kemp was active this week is because the Bengals claimed Chris Lamons off of genuinely, they probably would have gone with Lamons over a Marcus Kemp for that game if
the call sheet is MVS go get open. That's literally what it is, right?
It's crazy, right? I can't imagine what they were trying to do, what they were trying to navigate. I mean, it looked like they were going to play a lot of heavy tight ends anyway. They're going to play more tight ends than they typically did, and they kind of leaned on that a little bit. But it kind of feels like that the game plan was kind of held together by duct tape after all those receivers went out.
And in the second half, they were doing some of the drop 8 stuff, which gives them trouble, but Mahomes was hitting throws against it that he wasn't hitting last year, right? And even with not limited mobility, because, he kind of won the game on a scramble, right? Less mobility than we're used to, he was still able to buy enough time for guys to find those gaps deep down the field. If I recall correctly, the last touchdown was against a drop 8. I think it was only a 3-man rush, if I recall correctly.
I can't remember.
I know you were not in a mental state that could keep track of that, but rough. If you look at the metrics against drop 8, this is the best they've ever done against that, even with the receiving injuries. And you know what? I don't think they're going to see that much of it against Philly anyway, because they basically just run Vic Fangio's defense, but with a different coordinator. Yeah. now that Vic actually got hired in Miami, I don't know how much input he's going to have on the defensive game planning for KC. If he's not helping with their game plan, obviously that's good for KC. But if he is, and he's not already down in Miami, doing DC stuff there, that's actually kind of an advantage in my opinion, because then you can kind of just go back to, all of your previous tape against Vic Fangio's defense, which you have a lot of, plus, a Giro this year in Denver. Like, there is a lot of tape against this style of defense, which Philly runs. So I think that there are resources that we can use, and we will, probably next week, when we, because we're at Shrine Bowl right now, when we have time to kind of dive into tendencies. Like, off the top of my head, Philly plays quarters like 30% of the time on early downs, which even by Fangio standards is like insane, right? But the Chiefs can use that to their advantage, because if they're going into the game knowing that regardless of, personnel grouping formation, like we're going to see quarters, they can, kind of game plan for that in terms of like, okay, what are our runs we like against that? What are our passes we like against? What are our shot plays we like against that? If people are healthy, we don't know yet. If people are healthy, like maybe we see like an early pin and post to MVS because there's not going to be a post safety. Like, there are some advantages to kind of knowing the system in Philly, even though they haven't played Philly, because of, the familiarity with the coaching staff.
I think there's going to be some very interesting things when you're talking about looking ahead to the Eagles game, where we're talking about like personnel stuff. The Chiefs can probably keep some mystery there with a lot of the guys that ended the game.
Why would you give it away?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
There's some comments coming out about L'Jarius Sneed. Andy, hey, he's done a lot of great stuff for us, and we'll see. If he can go, great. If not, he's been a great player.
I really hope he can go,
though. Oh, I do too.
My God.
Sounds like he was. Well, and here's an interesting thing going back to the Bengals. Sounds like he was gonna follow Jamar. That was kind of their plan. That's what Andy said in the press conference. He's gonna follow Jamar a little bit.
So, on one hand, here I love L'Jarius. Mm-hmm. If there's somebody that will get up on the line of scrimmage and box with Jamar, it's L'Jarius. It's the part after the boxing.
Yeah, that's been a struggle all year.
The running the 4-3 part that I would, but for me, put McDuffie on him.
Yeah.
But hey, luckily they survived it. They don't have to. Well, now they have to deal with AJ Brown, similar kind of problem. I would probably put Trent on him, but we'll see.
It's gonna be. It's just interesting. Like, it's interesting that they were gonna do that. The funny thing is, I actually thought that the young corners did a pretty good job in press this week against the Bengals.
As good as you can hope for. Because remember, a lot of the production from Jamar and Higgins, you had that massive jump ball to Higgins where he jumped like 10 feet in the air. What are you gonna do against that, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had the 4th and 6 bomb to Jamar. But like, other than that, they were pretty okay.
Yeah. I mean, they did a good job disrupting at the line of scrimmage. They were physical there. I mean, and like, obviously, I think, the Bengals are going to get theirs from time to time. Those are 2 elite receivers. Those are 2 of the best receivers in football, winning at the catch point. And for those 2 rookies, a couple moments where they weren't really great about turning their head, but I think about some situational football stuff. I look at, right at the end of the half, or right in the end of the first half, you got 12 seconds left. The ball's at the 5-yard line. You've got, a couple shots to throw a fade, and so they challenge. They throw they throw a fade to T. Higgins. Jalen Watson makes an outstanding play, winning at the catch point, and then the next play, I'm pretty sure it was Higgins on the other side of the field. They had Josh Williams on him, and he just blanketed him in coverage. They tried to throw an out route. The 2 rookie corners playing physical, playing with their length and physicality, like. That's something you look and see. Hey, they did a decent job with those, against T and against Jamar Chase. They're going to have to do the same thing against AJ Brown.
And AJ, it's a little bit of a different problem because AJ's stronger than Jamar. It doesn't have the same top end speed, but pressing AJ is a whole different animal because he is just so unbelievably physical, right? Mm-hmm. They win on the same routes, but they win a different way. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'm kind of advocating for Trent, because I don't necessarily want Trent to press him. I want Trent to mirror him, and I think that Trent can get up there. And we saw that vert on that last throw that he disrupted to T, right? That was a huge play.
So much for that arm length.
Exactly.
And maybe with the arm length he has a pick.
Well, I mean, when you jump like 38 inches or whatever, like, you can kind of make up for that.
Yeah.
But I think McDuffie, in terms of playing the ball at the high point with his, verticality as a corner, even go back to his time at UW, like he was always really good at that. So he's the guy that I'm tabbing to go against AJ, not necessarily from a can he press him perspective, more so can he play the ball at the catch point.
Mm-hmm. No, and it sounds like that was one of the points of emphasis for Steve Spagnuolo this week when he's talking about what the Bengals specifically is playing at the catch point, and that's something that they tried to get better at with this young group, this young secondary. They got thrown into the fire. I mean, the Chiefs had at one point, Brett, the Chiefs had 6 rookies on the field in some of their personnel groupings,
and they only allowed 20 points.
They only allowed 20 points
against the Bengals.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's just, and it's nuts. And you look at the productivity of this rookie class. George Karlaftis gets a sack. Trent McDuffie has some big plays. The only negative plays on Trent McDuffie's ledger this week were really plays he slipped on. I think there was one, the out route on that long drive to, I think he tried to carry number 2 or something like that. But outside of that, it's like that he played well. Brian Cook had the pass breakup that Joshua Williams wound up intercepting. Joshua Williams had a good day. Jalen Watson, another interception.
Not to give too much credit to the Bengals, but that tackle by T. Higgins on that was nuts.
Yeah.
That was where I was actually a little bit worried.
That was
because that saved 40 yards of field position.
Probably. Like, seriously, I mean, I don't know how long he would have been running, but he had some green to run. But it's just, I think that experience for that young defense, like, you see Spags continue to build. You see Spags continue to, kind of grow with this group, and it does feel like even with a young secondary, even with a young team that had a lot of adversity strike early in the game for them defensively. I mean, Spags was in his bag, and he was able to run a lot of different stuff and kind of do it with a young group.
What I found interesting was when they absolutely needed it most, we're putting Chris Jones out on the edge and say go win, and he did, obviously, because he's Chris Jones. What I'm fascinated to see is, do they do that again against an injured Lane Johnson, who at this point I don't think is going to get any healthier the rest of the year?
No. I think he tore his did I see he tore his groin again?
I mean, he's playing through it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still Lane Johnson, right?
Yeah.
He's first ballot Hall of Famer. But so is Chris.
Yeah.
And it's one thing if you're Lane to anchor against, say, Kayvon Thibodeau. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to anchor against Chris Jones. Mm-hmm. I would be so fascinated to see early on in the Super Bowl if we get a couple reps from Chris out there just to see what Lane can take.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of intentionality through the chest, specifically this week, it felt like, against this Bengals offensive line.
They were pissed.
Oh, my God.
They were so mad.
It was great.
The whole Burrowhead stuff and the Cincy Mayer stuff and the Eli Apple stuff, like, they were exercising some demons out there.
Absolutely. And I think they were going to regardless because, like, this team has just, like, been a thorn in their side. But, yeah, like, I think all that additional motivation, like, for sure added some levels to this.
The stage is set, and we're counting down to the battle in Arizona. There's no better way to get ready for the NFL action than with DraftKings Sportsbook, official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 57. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in free bets instantly. Plus, all new and existing customers can take a shot at an even bigger payout with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Boost your Super Bowl 57 winnings with each leg you add up to 100%. Chiefs and Eagles, the Andy Reid, Kelsey Brothers Bowl. This is going to be amazing. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code KCSN. New customers can bet $5 on Super Bowl 57 and get $200 in free bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void in Ohio. See show notes for details.
That pass rush, I mean, Chris Jones, like, that's the, like, of that version of Chris Jones. I don't know if we need to rename Arizona's, rename the Cardinal Stadium Burrowhead, something, whatever works, because that version of Chris Jones, getting him on that field is an absolute. He's had a career year.
That might be the best game he's ever played, to be honest. And that's Chris Jones.
Yeah.
And that's the best game he's ever played.
I genuinely think that. Like, I'm lockstep with you. Like, that is just
that man plays against the Raiders twice a year, and that's the best game he's ever played.
Yeah, he just put together just an unbelievable performance. Where, I think this has kind of like been the build-up. This has kind of been a career year and like not a do or die year for the Chiefs, but there's decisions to make about him and his contract after this season.
Pay him.
They're gonna pay him.
Who cares?
They're gonna pay him.
It's Chris Jones.
Exactly. They're gonna pay him.
He could walk in there and ask for $30 million a year. I would say yes.
Well, he might.
he will, but he's earned it.
He might.
He's earned it.
He might.
Do you think they're going to the Super Bowl 3 times in 5 years without Chris Jones?
No.
Exactly.
I don't. I don't.
Do you think the Hunt family is going to care about $30 million compared to going to Super Bowls? Probably not.
We'll find out. I mean, that's going to be. But I think he set himself up, and I think the whole thing is next year was kind of a big year in making a decision on how this is going to work with Chris Jones. His salary cap hit is $30 million next year. It's about
guess what's it's going to get converted,
and it's going to go up.
We're going to free up $20 million.
Yeah,
because that's how the cap works. Mm-hmm. Is you get a $30 million base salary hit, and then it's like, let's pay that, and then we spread it out over the next 4 years or something like that. He retires a Chief. He goes to the Hall of Fame in the first ballot.
I think that's the direction we're trending after.
That's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing here. Any other option to me just doesn't make sense.
I think I think before the season there probably was a little bit of doubt, and I think he shut that doubt out in every way imaginable. And it's not the end cap because there's one more game left, but that was I think that game we just saw was a defining moment for Chris Jones' legacy. Where he's had some big games and he's had some big plays, and he hadn't had a sack, a statistical. He hasn't had a stat, he hasn't had the stat to back up the disruption.
14 playoff games.
It's wild.
But also it is kind of a testament of that man's been getting the protection slid his way for 14 playoff games.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it.
And then he finally gets out on the edge one-on-one. Is oh, thank God I have space.
Well, and he's still disrupted games, and that's the thing. That's why I really wanted him to make sure that he was going to get a sack at some point, just to shut this stupid narrative up, because he's made big impacts on games in the playoffs. They don't win the Super Bowl a couple years ago without what he does in the fourth quarter. He took that game over, and you see today, or you see Sunday, he took that game over in the most dominant way that we've seen, and they tried to slide some protection to him still, and it still didn't matter. And there was one-on-ones that the thing that's really encouraging for me looking forward is, they still, they would double team Chris Jones. The rest of that defensive line stood up in a big way. Mike Dana possibly had the best game of his life, too. It wasn't just Chris Jones.
Out of nowhere.
Right?
Out of nowhere. But it was great. It was great.
Just rushing from the inside and disrupting, and George Karlaftis gets a sack. Frank Clark gets a sack and a half.
Dana drew that big hold on 3rd and 10 that, probably changed the game completely, because I think they punted on that drive, right?
Yes. And then Mike Dana was the one that actually got home first on the first possession of the game for the Bengals. The Bengals are really good playing from the front. That's one of the things that the Bengals are so tough is they like to play with a lead, and I think they'd won some ridiculous amount of games in a row when they score first. And the Chiefs got him off the field quickly, put points on the board, and that was the rest of that. But Mike Dana was the one that first stop, that huge stop. He actually was the one that got the near sack. Joe Burrow does what he does, gets out of it somehow, the same way he got out of it somehow.
Was that the one where he shook Bolton into Narnia?
No, that wasn't this one. But this one, Mike Dana, he gets out of that, but then Chris Jones that's the one he gets his sack too. So Mike Dana played out of his mind. That whole defensive front, I think, played out of their mind.
Yeah, it was, and this is saying a lot, the best Chiefs defensive performance I've seen in 2 years.
Oh, I agree.
All things considered, right? And I think carrying that momentum with Spags into the Super Bowl in the stadium, by the way, fun fact, where he was the Giants DC when they beat Tom Brady. In the because that was the first Super Bowl that was in Arizona. Spags was the DC. I'm actually working on a project on that game for the NFL right now.
Nice.
And I'm going to be down in the Super Bowl filming at the stadium for that, and it's about Spags' Super Bowl game plan in that game. So I was able to work some relationships and get a sort of comparable playbook that I'm going to be studying my ass off, so that when I come back and talk about what they're going to do in this game, I'll have a little bit more knowledge on it.
That's going to be fun to watch. And what Steve Spagnuolo is able to do in big games.
Oh, he's a magician. He's the best. There's a lot of great defensive coordinators, Wade Phillips, Vic Fangio. If I have one game that I got to win, give me Spags. He look at his history in big games. He always comes through. He found
a way, and I think he had Joe Burrow in a blender yesterday. I genuinely there was some big and I think honestly, I think the default for Cincinnati last night was let's keep some guys in protection and just let our dudes be dudes.
They did not trust Adeniji and Carmen at all, and for good reason, but they did not trust them.
They shouldn't.
The one time they didn't give Adeniji chip help, Chris Jones won the game, basically.
Well, and even Max Sharping. I don't think they're. I don't know how much they actually trust him either. If I'm being
Neither
honest.
did the Texans. So.
Yeah, there's a reason.
It's not a new thing.
There's
here.
a reason he's a Bengal. But yeah, I think the Bengals game plan really didn't have. I mean, like the Bengals game plan, I think that in the biggest chunk plays, a lot of them was just like, hey, we're just gonna keep protection in, and we're gonna see what happens. I mean, we talk about the 4th and 6. That's a 3-man route.
And Jamar go win.
That's
literally what it is.
That's what it was.
What I was kind of surprised by is you look at the run-pass splits in the first half. I think Burrow had 11 passes, and there was like 3 runs from Mixon. In the show that we did last week, time is a weird thing right now for us. One of my main concerns / predictions that Willie Gay got on my ass about on Instagram. I didn't tell you he DM'd me, did he?
No.
Yeah, he hunted down my Instagram. DM me about it. But I was bringing up some stats that were especially relevant from the last meeting where, they averaged 6 yards a carry in inside zone and 6.4 on duo, and they just ran it down their throat with Samaje Perine. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Bengals did against the Bills, was just inside zone, inside zone, inside zone. And I was like, look, inside zone and duo has been a problem for the Chiefs all year. They allowed like 5.5 carries or something like that. I was worried that that's what this game was going to turn into, and that the whole talk about Mahomes' ankle and how are they going to handle Jamar and all that it was going to be worthless because it was just going to be we're running 35 times. And then the Bengals came out and it was like a 3-11 run pass split in the first half. And I was like, if they're going to do that, they stand no chance. Their only way to win this game is to run the ball, and they didn't.
I wonder if game script kind of changes a little bit for them. I think they flipped a little bit too early because they had 2 really early possessions.
Like 13-3.
I know, but but the thing is, I think the thing is a 3-and-out to start the game. So
they got spooked. They got spooked.
And I think they had a second 3-and-out to start the game as well. So the Bengals had 0 yards in the first quarter.
What I want to bet, I wasn't in Arrowhead, obviously, I was here, but you get a 3-and-out, I'm sure Arrowhead was just deafening. And they're like, we need a dagger or something to quiet them down. And then they just didn't get it. Yeah. Until it's too late.
Yeah, 0. I mean, the Chiefs held the Bengals to 0 yards in the first quarter, which is just an absurd stat for if this defense, again, like we're talking about, they stepped up in just a massive, massive way. Before we get out of here, real quick, Patrick LaVon Mahomes on one leg.
Still a top 3 quarterback, and he ain't 3. He's only started 5 years now. Yeah. He is already one of the 5 greatest quarterbacks of all time in 5 years. Mm-hmm. The list is Tom at 1, and then in whatever order you want, Peyton, Dan Marino, Drew Brees, Patrick Mahomes.
I think so. I think you're right.
He's already there.
I'll start fighting some people. I'll start puffing my chest about his rankings soon enough because,
if he wins a Super Bowl this year, we're well on our way to catching Tom at this point.
This is going to be my take. I don't think he needs to catch Tom in rings to be considered the GOAT at some point in his life.
I think I say we, I'm not even a Chiefs fan, but I'm saying we.
You're a case
but I've covered the Chiefs more than any other team this year. So I'm a closet Chiefs fan. Let's call it that.
There you go. I'll take it.
I think if the Chiefs get to as many straight AFC Championship games as the Tom Brady Patriots did, which at this point they're already halfway there, right? Mm-hmm. They've literally never missed with Patrick Mahomes. If they get that and then exceed it, which again, I'm not ruling that out, there's an argument.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And the AFC's harder now, by the way, than it was back then.
Well, and I know we've spent a lot of time talking about Spags defense, but it's not exactly a Bill Belichick defense that Patrick Mahomes is getting to play with, So yeah, there's that too. That's Brett Kollmann. This is KCSN Update. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We appreciate it, and we'll catch you later.